Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the redneck, and you bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to get you to do it too. And as we always do on Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, I want to remind you that when we say gone green on this program, we don't mean merely environmentalism. We're talking about something deeper. We're talking about the interconnectedness of all of life, deep ecology. And whether you come at that from a purely scientific perspective or you come at it from a deeply spiritual ecofeminist perspective, or like me, you recognize that both of those are perspectives that are valid and bring us to the same conclusion. Remember that we are all interconnected in this web of life, and whatever we do to that web, we are doing to ourselves. And with that, I'm gonna bring my co-host Shane Knight into the conversation. Shane, how you doing,
How you
brother?
doing, David?
Man,
There we
look
go.
at
Let's
here.
see.
Let's let's get both of us together at the same time. What do
There
you
we
think?
go.
Look at
There
that.
we go. There we go.
You know,
Magic.
Shane, I gotta say, on a personal level, man, I'm as happy as a pig in shit. I'm happy, I'm healthy, I do meaningful, productive work. I am respected by people who I respect. I'm hated by my class enemies. In every way, I can check the box. But on a deeper, bigger level, Shane, I am as nervous as I could be. I am watching actual fascism emerge. I am watching the beginning of a true ecological collapse, and ain't nobody coming to save us.
Well, we're gonna have to do it our damn selves. And I, for one, am starting to grow more comfortable with that idea, even though, like you, I am actually frightened, man. Um, but also hopeful. The rapidity with which I guess the institutions that we all grew up and knew and sort of thought were going to be here for our lives, right, are falling apart, and it's getting more difficult to sort of see through the clutter and figure out what's real and what's just a facade and how much of this is show. But at the end of the day, they're all out for number one, firstly and foremost. They don't give a flying fuck about the people of this country. And secondarily, when you said ain't nobody gonna come save us, you're right. The Democrats, they're not doing a damn thing. I mean, you saw this past, I don't know, did you see what happened on Friday, right? We were talking about that with Chuck Schumer
Oh
and that
my
whole,
gosh, a
yeah,
collapse, an utter and complete collapse. And this
yeah,
is what really irritates me, Shane, is that during the last election, the Democrat Party were using the words of fascism, watch
yeah,
out, but they were using it just as a talking point. But they capitulated. They didn't just concede, they have capitulated. I want you to throw that photo up that you showed me just before we started this program, just so
yeah.
people can get a sense of what we talking about here.
Well, yeah, hang on one second. Let me see. Yes, share that. And then what I want you to see, yeah, this is Chuck Schumer with guess who? Mr. Orange Fatso himself. Look at that. You know what it looks like he's saying there? You owe me.
Right?
you
And
know?
so, but what is owed to who? Because you also found another photograph that might be a good compare and contrast.
Oh,
So
yeah, yeah.
let's throw that one up.
Not far off. Look at this. Now, I get, you know, it's not like we're doing this with a foreign government and where we've got Neville Chamberlain basically almost kowtowing right there to Hitler. You know, that photo is so staged because Chamberlain's taller than him and they couldn't have that. But at the same time, it's the same exact sentiment there to kiss the fucking ring and kowtow to ultimate fascism. And it's not, I really have trouble. This is just modern and colorized, but at the same time, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. And to tell you the truth, David, over the weekend, you should have seen the motherfucking outrage that was happening up here in New York. People were in the streets. They were out marching in front of Chuck Schumer's office on Friday. Um, there must have been, I don't know, there must have been about 2,000 people out there. We got out there for about 20 minutes before we had to run off. But then again, on Saturday, there was a huge protest here. They started in Foley Square, and it was just anti-fascist protests, not any one particular group, but the people that were out there, and the energy was really, really rejuvenating. I don't know, there was thousands of people out there on Saturday in response to all this shenanigery. But it's pretty scary, man.
It is scary, but one thing that I'm remembering and reminding myself, and that is that the ordinary people are seeing through this, that there is a recognition, and I think it's really important to just name the leadership of the Democratic Party. Their job is to protect capitalism and U.S. empire.
Yeah.
And they will throw anybody under the bus that they need to. At the moment, it's transgendered people and undocumented people, but
Yep.
it will be any other group of people. And one of the things that I take solace in, and in fact, inspiration from, is the recognition that ordinary people like us before confronted the need to address capitalism. And that happened during the 1930s as well, because workers, ranchers, farmers, ordinary people built a broad left movement, and there was actually something that people could latch onto. And that's why I'm so excited to bring our guest this week, Emily Kawano, into the conversation, because Emily Kawano is both an organizer and an economist. Emily Kawano has also a lifetime, really, of being a practicing economist and a community organizer, taking theory and practice and putting it into work. Emily Kawano, welcome to Redneck Gone Green.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, happy to have
Emily,
you, especially your point of view.
Before we jump in, I do want to just acknowledge you and I know each other. And in fact, I still remember when we first met, and it was in 2007 in Atlanta, Georgia, where you and I were both participating as organizers in the U.S. Social Forum process. When we gather about 15,000 people there, and I remember I was doing a radical democracy track, and you were putting together a track on solidarity economy, and I went to several of those. And I remember, I'm going to tell on myself now, I remember walking away thinking, that's just co-ops. I'm a serious revolutionary. And, now, just to name it, I've come full around. You and I have the honor of co-coordinating the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network. And this is David Cobb saying, Emily was right. I was wrong. I came to understand the power of solidarity economy. And I want you to help our listeners and our viewers here on Redneck Gone Green help to have the same experience I did. What the heck is a solidarity economy, and why is that framework so powerful?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that cue. That's perfect. So yeah, David mentions that because the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network was launched out of that U.S. Social Forum in 2007. And so let me do a quick down and dirty definition of what is the solidarity economy. I first want to preface this by saying this definition comes both out of the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network and REPES. So REPES is the International Solidarity Economy Network that connects up solidarity economy movements, initiatives, actors throughout the world, present in every continent except for Antarctica. So here's the REPES went through a 2-year international consultation process to try to get a common floor of definition of what is the solidarity economy. So this definition draws on that. So first, it's a framework. We don't call it a theory. We call it a framework. It's a framework that, number 2, connects solidarity economy practices and, of course, the people involved in that, practitioners, organizers, advocates, etc. So it's a framework that connects up solidarity economy practices. The solidarity economy practices are those that align with solidarity economy values. In the US Solidarity Economy Network, we talk about 5 values. It'll look a little different in different places and parts of the world, but there's a lot of commonality. So these 5 capture it for us. So number 1 is solidarity, cooperation, mutualism, etc. Number 2, participatory democracy. So beyond the voting booth to democracy in the workplace, democracy in the community, etc. Number 3 is equity. We talk about equity in all dimensions. So race, class, gender, etc. Right? So very much an anti-oppression framework. Number 4 is sustainability. I don't think I have to explain that. And number 5 is pluralism, which is a really important value, which means that we believe that there are many paths. There are many paths to that better world, right? That more just, sustainable, democratic, equitable world. And solidarity economy is a very big tent, and there are many different strategies that align with solidarity economy. And solidarity economy is not about saying this is the right path, that is the wrong path. Let's be humble. Let's be solidaristic. Let's respect each other and see, you know, different things are going to work at different times, different places, in different cultures, and different political, economic, social realities. So that's the down and dirty definition. All of that comes together to articulate a post-capitalist vision. We are very clear that we do not believe that we're going to get to that better world by reforming capitalism. So
Emily, I want to stop because
please.
this is such a critical point that you're making. And I want to compare and contrast and tease out. It is a pluralistic approach, but it is also clear and unambiguously a post-capitalist framework,
That's right.
goal, right? And I think a lot of people sometimes get confused when they hear you and me and others say there's not one right path, that there's any number of paths up the mountain. But the solidarity economy framework, and one of the things that the reasons that I've in fact drank the Kool-Aid and become such an advocate is it is unambiguously a post-capitalist economic framework. And I'm wondering if you could tease out, well, wait a minute, I thought you just said it's not dogmatic, it's like, etc. How do you reconcile pluralism with the unambiguous post-capitalist framework?
Yeah, I mean, pluralism doesn't mean you accept everything. You draw some boundaries to some broad boundaries and guardrails, which we do, right? Grounded in values of this, that, and the other. And we believe in solidarity economy that there are things about capitalism that are fundamentally at odds with these values. Take one, for example, democracy, right? A capitalist model, a capitalist mode of production is inherently undemocratic, given the structure of production of capitalist enterprises, where the owner really ultimately has not only the ownership, but also has control. Might, through sort of maybe kindness, noblesse oblige, allow workers to have some vote, but ultimately could always take that back, right? So it's inherently, as a system, undemocratic. Also, I believe it's, as a system, inherently unsustainable because of the imperative for profit maximization and growth and competition that makes the whole stew so toxic. So capitalism is always going to be seeking to maximize profits, and growth is one of those. Blind growth is one of the strategies, powerful strategies of maximizing profit. So it's inherently gonna be rapacious of the earth, right? So those are a couple ways in which capitalism is just inherently, intrinsically at odds with solidarity economy values.
So I'll tell you, Emily, you were getting a lot of love in the comments section, and agreement that we have to overgrow capitalism. We have to replace capitalism. Capitalism cannot be reformed. So you're getting no pushback on the Redneck Gone Green audience. And I know before you were the co-coordinator of the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network, as an economist, you helped to co-found the Center for Popular Economics. And I've heard you break it down without dumbing it down. You've got an ability to describe the qualities or the characteristics of capitalism. So I'm going to invite you, for the purposes of our listeners and our viewers, hey, Emily Kawano, can you describe capitalism so that just anybody at a pool hall or a bowling alley could understand it?
Well, I'll try, but I do want to just correct one thing. I am not a founder or co-founder of the Center for Popular Economics. No, I joined when I was in graduate school, but I was the executive director for almost 10 years. So here's the definition that the Center for Popular Economics, which is a collective of progressive to radical economists that seeks to help to demystify economics and help regular folk understand what's going on. So here's the definition that we've been using for well over 40 years, and it's pretty well stood the test of time. So there are 5 characteristics that we talk about, and you need all 5. One alone won't do. So first of all, you have private ownership of the MOPs. What's the MOPs? MOPS are the means of production. What are the means of production? It's just the stuff that you need to produce stuff. It's the land, it's your building, it's your tools, it's your machinery, etc. Right? It's your inputs. Those are your MOPs, your means of production. So private ownership means that is the capitalist, right? That's a capitalist. Number 2, you need wage labor, right? You hire people on and you pay them a wage to do the work. Those are your workers, right? So right there, your capitalist class and your working class, there is an inherent class conflict there, because the capitalist is going to be trying to maximize profits. That's the 3rd bullet point. 3rd characteristic, profit maximization. So very often, not always, there are some well-intentioned capitalists, but most capitalists are trying to maximize profits on the backs of workers, right? Reducing wages, making a longer workday, intensifying work, degrading working conditions. So there is this inherent class conflict baked into capitalism, that it just is, despite the fact that there might be some exceptions, the system as a whole will always generate that class conflict. The 4th is commodity production. The 4th characteristic is commodity production, and that just means you're producing things for sale, not necessarily for use. So often capitalism is producing stuff that's very profitable, but isn't producing enough of things that we really need. Generic drugs is an example. There are many basic, really needed, badly needed generic drugs that aren't being produced. There's a dire shortage because they're not profitable, because they're generic now. And the 5th characteristic is all of this is mediated by market exchange, right? Supply and demand, driving prices up and down. So those are the 5 characteristics. You need them all. One alone won't do. And the reason why it's important is, for instance, I have heard from people working in a worker cooperative say, oh yeah, we're a capitalist business because we engage in commodity production. We produce things for sale and we sell them on the marketplace. So we're a capitalist business. But what is not true is they do not have that class divide, right? The workers are the owners, right? So it is not a capitalist mode of production.
So, Emily, one of the things that I love about that description is it really does, like, it comports with any introduction to macroeconomics textbook that you'll see. Like, you don't have to be a leftist to understand, oh, this is capitalism, private ownership of the means of production. You produce commodities for sale. You maximize profits. The whole thing is done through market allocation. That's literally, like, basically how any introduction to economics will work. And what I love is when you describe that, you do it in a way that says a worker-owned cooperative is not inherently capitalism in practice, but it can exist within capitalism. And that's the part that I think that a lot of folks don't quite understand. And I'm gonna go to my my co-host and good friend from Mississippi, Shane. Are we making sense right now? Because sometimes I worry that Emily and I and others, we say we can talk about this to folks in pool halls and bowling alleys. I'm gonna ask you: is Emily making sense right now, or?
Well, yes, but I think one of the things that, a lot of people tend to do is they begin to imagine, well, I see your point. I understand the vision, right? I get that there are all these things that we need to change and how they should look once they are changed. I get the reasoning. What I don't understand, and people often don't, in my opinion, do a good enough job of really laying out for people to prevent them from just dissociating into an imaginary Star Trek future or whatever version of the replacement of our society they want to jump to. Laying out for people like, okay, this isn't going to be an instantaneous swap from capitalism to a solidarity economy. It's not going to be an overnight journey into Walmart becoming a worker-owned enterprise, right? So how do we envision, or how can you really help me sort of pull together how this might work? And my brain goes to like, so a solidarity economy network, there's going to be, I'm assuming, examples of collaboration between different groups offering different things. And I want to know more about how that's working to grow a system large enough to actually replace what is in place now that is falling apart around us.
Yeah.
So that I'm not left not having a vision for it that can be based in reality, and instead I'm running away from reality, because I think a lot of people get caught up in that.
Right,
Does
like
that make
building
sense?
your own isolated utopia somewhere off in the mountains or the woods. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So solidarity economy is really generally not that, right? It is a big tent, right? There's all kinds of people doing all kinds of things, right? But one thing that we do is we're looking for where that foundation is, all the instances that surround us. And there are many, many, many. We're not building this from scratch. A lot of solidarity economy practices are ancient, old. A lot of these cooperative systems are ancient. You can look at ancient forms of irrigation where communities cooperated with each other to manage water systems covering a vast area of land. You look at traditional forest management approaches, common pool resource management, right? These things, many of them are very ancient. Many indigenous societies still have some of that knowledge and are trying to bring it back. There was a time, once upon a time, where this was a common way of working together, cooperating. It wasn't driven by maximizing profits. Capitalism is a relatively young economic system, and if it is not serving our needs and interests and welfare and the welfare of Mother Earth, then we can change it. It's a social construction. So back to the foundation, there are examples of solidarity economy all around us. So certainly worker cooperatives are important. In solidarity economies, cooperative housing, cooperative consumer cooperatives like food co-ops, credit unions, which exist all over the country. Credit unions are by definition, it's a form of a cooperative. Electrical cooperatives provide a huge amount of electricity to rural areas where it just wasn't profitable for electric companies to build that infrastructure. But there's things like mutual aid, which people have been engaging in for forever, before it was even called that, people helping each other out, right? That is a valuable economic activity, even if there's no money exchanging hand. That's really valuable. Childcare, right? Child rearing, care work. That's a really valuable part of the economy. It's a valuable economic contribution. We almost all engage in that, taking care of our kids, our parents, our siblings, our neighbors, right? We all engage in that. That's part of the solidarity economy. Things like a community land trust, if people are familiar with that, is part of the solidarity economy. I mean, we do have, I didn't realize I could share a screen. If I had, I would show a taxonomy that gives you lots and lots of examples in every economic sector. But suffice it to say, we're not starting from scratch. There are many, many practices that we can build on. Some are old, some are new, some are alternative, some are mainstream. I often also pull out policies, right, that are probably keepers, say something like public education or institutions that are probably keepers, that are part of the state, like education or some regulations around health and safety, environmental protections. These would be part of the solidarity economy. So there's a lot that exists, and solidarity economy is exactly about trying to make those connections between these practices that are otherwise siloed. And so they're not perceived as being part of the same system. They're just seen as kind of a cute co-op over there, a cute community land trust over there, a cute social currency over there. And I will give an example of an effort to try to build a local solidarity economy ecosystem. Are you trying to get in there? Yeah,
I am, because I definitely want to get into the U.S. version. But Patricia Veneer, who is a frequent commentator, viewer, listener, has a really important question in the chat that I want to lift up. She says, quote, "I understand Mondragon in Spain has started to lose its cooperative structure." She asked, "Is that true? And if so, what does that mean for how we can shore up cooperative enterprises so they don't regress?" So I'm going to ask you to contextualize that, say a word or two about Mondragon, and then address Patricia's question, which I have as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Great question.
I'm right there with you.
Great question. I can't say that I know the inner workings of Mondragon, right? So there's a way in which I can't answer that. What I could say is I know there are many critiques of Mondragon, some of which I share. What I find really encouraging is, so for example, when Mondragon expanded globally, they took on a lot of companies that are not cooperative, and they really struggled with that, right? Like it was in some countries it was difficult, right, to form them as a cooperative.
And Emily, but
yep.
let's, just because some viewers and listeners may not be as familiar with Mondragon, so let me just say, folks, when we talk about Mondragon, both Emily, myself, or Patricia and her question, we're talking about the third largest business entity in the entire country of Spain. That's enormous, right? So even as I might offer, and Emily might offer, some constructive critiques or lessons, let's acknowledge how incredibly effective they have been about integrating into the global economy. So Emily, could you just say a word about where Mondragon came from, its history, and then we can talk about the current inner workings.
Yeah, good point. So Mondragon is in the Basque region of Spain, which has its own culture, its own language. It was a very, very poor, very much oppressed region in Spain under the Franco regime. In 1956, the first co-op was started up. It was a small cook stove cooperative. And from there, from 1956, they've expanded to be like a cooperative ecosystem, right? They're very diversified. They have manufacturing, they have retail stores, they have housing, they have their own university, they have their own research and development, they have their own social security system, they have their own bank, which was really pretty key. So the profits or savings from the co-ops go into the bank, and it can be lent out to support other co-ops. So I think they're up to, I always kind of get a little hazy on the exact number, but over 100 co-ops. I can't remember. I don't know. Somebody help me out if you know how many employees or worker owners, right? It's just a very successful model of a large, connected up array of co-ops.
So Emily, the number is actually 70,000 people are.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, it is but a large portion of them are worker owners, but not all of them, which is why I think, to me, Patricia, your question was so valuable, because I want to lift up what Mondragon has done, what they are producing goods and services. They are competing within the capitalist economy. But from my perspective, and this is just David Cobb, I'm not speaking for the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network or for RAPES, but the critique I would offer is that they have basically made peace with capitalism rather than said, we are going to replace capitalism. And this is where I think it's not that they have, quote, lost their cooperative structure, because the Mondragon is still a cooperative structure, but it has accepted capitalism will exist and we will exist alongside of it. And I don't know, Emily, if I would welcome your critique of me or your reaction to kind of how
I think that's right. My perception is that that's always been the case, right? They did not start off with a let's overthrow capitalism perspective. It was fairly practical. It was about employing people in a really poor and struggling area, community. So very practical. That's my perception. Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think it's that they're losing their cooperative structure. The criticism has been more, for a while they were absorbing other businesses, sometimes in other countries, but sometimes even within Spain. They were bringing in say supermarkets, and not all the workers were becoming worker owners. So what I just to finish up about what I found encouraging about them is that criticism was growing out there, and they heard it and they took it on board. And last I knew, they had made a commitment to not do any more international expansion without having a very clear path towards making sure that those international businesses can become a worker cooperative. And the same, like making a really concerted effort to bring people in as worker owners as quickly and as vigorously as possible. So they're not perfect. Like they have a saying, this is not heaven and we are not angels, which I love, right? And that's just true across the board, right?
And
That's
what I
solidarity economy.
What I appreciate, you went exactly where I wanted to go, Emily, was to really underscore the solidarity economy is not merely theory. Many times leftists seem like we've got all these theories, but we're theory in search of a practice. One of the things that I really love about the solidarity economy framework is it literally is practice in search of a theory. In other words, it has existed before the enclosure movement. It exists now. All of the things that you were describing are all happening now. What I think that we need to grapple with and really come to terms with, how can we put these all together into a coherent program so that they're not just cool practices or not just cool policies, right? Because policies like universal basic income or public banking or participatory budgeting, like those are great policies. But how do we put them all together so that it's a coherent program to replace capitalism?
Yeah, and here maybe I'll get back to the point of building a local solidarity economy ecosystem. So this is something in both the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network and this other project called Resist and Build that we've been engaging in for going on 4 years, I believe. Really asking the question of how to scale up and how to make those connections, right? So that these pieces of the solidarity economy that exist all around us are connected up and people can start perceiving it as a system. So a couple examples that we use. One is People's Network for Land and Liberation. So my day job is I'm the co-director of Wellspring Cooperative in Springfield, Mass, Holyoke, Mass. So we're a member along with 5 other nodes throughout the country. All of us are committed to the same vision and project. We all talk about it slightly differently. So this is how I talk about it. We are seeking to leverage a community land trust model. I'll explain that in a second for those who aren't familiar. So seeking to leverage a community land trust model to build a local solidarity economy ecosystem. So a community land trust separates the land from what happens on top of the land, but because the land is owned by the trust, a nonprofit trust, the land is held in perpetuity for the benefit of the community. And the community land trust gets to say, gets to put conditions on what happens on that land. So community land trusts are very often used to develop permanently affordable housing. So say they help to build a house, they sell it to a household to somebody who otherwise wouldn't be able to ever afford a home, right? Under market rates. In exchange, when it comes time for that household to sell their house, they can't just sell it at market rate. If prices have doubled, they can't just do that. There's a formula. They can build some wealth from the equity of their home, but not just whatever the market is dictating. So that's how it remains permanently affordable. So our vision is, yes, to support permanently affordable housing, to develop sustainable food systems, right? Use the land for regenerative agriculture, use the land to build structures for production. So it could be worker co-ops, but it could also be community production, regular folk in the community providing for their own needs, right? We're committed to building out the tools and technology to do that. And we're very, very interested in digital fabrication. I'm not going to go into it, but that digital fabrication is like Star Trek. It really is, like in the next 15, 20 years. Amazing, mind-blowing potential from the people that really know this. A lot of it is being led by MIT. And the 5th piece is just we are really centering the importance of culture and connection and learning. So developing spaces for all that to happen. So I just want to mention the other 5 nodes besides I mentioned my organization, Wellspring Cooperative. The other 5 are Cooperation Jackson in Mississippi, Community Movement Builders in Atlanta, Cooperation Vermont, Native Roots Network out in California, and what do we call it? In Idlewild, Lake County Merrymakers, I guess is the name that they're using for the time being. So all of these nodes are building towards the same vision, and that's really exciting to me because it's so practical, it's so concrete. But it is not just building one thing, like not just co-ops or not just a CLT or right, and so that is a really exciting project that I'm very proud to be connected to.
Well, it sounds great, Emily. I want to ask you. One of our viewers, think his name was Michael Nugent, asked, would you see a struggle to save a hospital in a poor, undisturbed community led by community members as part of solidarity economics? And what responsibility would a hospital then have to community? And I also want to ask, like, once we get through that, can we maybe walk them through the process of how people could get involved? Great.
Yeah. So my answer is that it depends, right? The community could get together and save that somehow, whatever it takes, right? Getting some state funding or getting grants or getting donors or whatever it is. But it all depends. Like, what is the structure of that hospital at the end of that save, right? Does the community, is it community, somehow community owned or community accountable? Does the community have a seat at the table on the board? Do they have a baked in voice other than getting out there and protesting? Is it baked into the structure of governance of that hospital?
And Michael, I want to jump in on this point because, as Emily said, it depends. Like, is there some way that the community now owns the hospital or the land? Even deeper, I would argue, has that process culminated in eliminating the profit motive from providing healthcare? Because what makes healthcare so horrific in a capitalist economy is that it literally treats access to healthcare as a commodity to be bought and paid for at a profit, which is to say, when people argue and lament, oh, the US healthcare system is broken, I say, no, it's not, because it's operating exactly as it's designed to operate. Now, it's horrific, it's immoral, it's downright evil that the ability to get treatment, something that I believe should be a human right, that is now a commodity that's bought and paid for at a profit. And by the way, insurance comes in to try to allocate risk somehow, which is just insane. But really, if in your scenario, the community coming together, what would be revolutionary, not just transformational, but revolutionary, would be to make the demand and win a demand that says, in this instance, we're going to treat access to healthcare within this community as a fundamental human right, and the hospital is a way to provide that.
I agree with that completely. I also do believe that there are economic realities that hospitals are facing, and it's complicated. Our healthcare system is problematic. It is set up to make profits, and I think it would take a lot more than a struggle at one hospital in a low-income community. You really need a system change, right? You need resources flowing in a different way from a national level, and we don't have that. We don't have that yet. Exactly, but that is a deep project, right? To really restructure healthcare so that everybody has that right. Because if you just demand it as a right, there's a pretty good possibility that hospital is just going to go under, right? So there are these realities.
Right, and again, remember, the solidarity economy framework is pluralistic. There's not one right way. There's not only one path. And Emily Kawano and David Cobb, as the co-coordinators of the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network, will never, ever say not to make a reform that makes people's lives better. We will always applaud, support, and cheer any reform that makes people's lives better. I am not an ultra-leftist. I do believe in supporting reforms, but what I push myself and others to do is to ask, can we build a strategy that puts all of this together so that the total becomes greater than the sum of the parts? And that's why I want to get back to Shane's, the second part of Shane's question about, well, how can we come together as people and struggle and strategize together? Because Emily, you and I are doing some work together that we want to invite listeners and viewers of Redneck Gone Green to.
Right, right, right. So, yeah, one opportunity is to get involved. I mentioned briefly resist and build. So, this is a process that the US Solidarity Economy Network initiated with the intent of not owning it, right? We really had to build this process out with other organizations for us to co own and co develop. So the idea of resist and build is, first of all, just to recognize the importance of marrying up, interconnecting the build work of solidarity economy with a resist build that includes both electoral politics and policies, as well as the grassroots social movements, mobilizing, mobilizing the base. So those three spheres are really important. Just mobilizing the base or electing people that are sympathetic is not enough. It's very likely just to end up in reforms that strengthen capitalism if you do not have a vision of where you're going beyond capitalism. So that's one reason why it's important to marry them up. Conversely, the build work without the connection and grounding to the ongoing struggles that are going on in communities throughout our country. It's important just to keep that connection, because otherwise the build work can get very focused on just keeping that co-op alive or keeping that community land trust ticking along or whatever it might be, right? So that connection with the struggle is really important. So that was part of resist and build. So there were these three spheres, but in the center, as we went through this process, we recognized that a cross-cutting theme that is so important is, again, the importance of culture and care, right? That, capitalism here does not survive through force, right? Well, it might be getting there, but really, it's not like at the point of a gun that people engage in capitalism. It's our culture, right? It's this messaging and this story about there is no alternative. Capitalism is sort of has always been, will always be. There's just no other alternative. So partly addressing that culture, right? Building our culture is really, really important. And so getting back to Shane's question about how do people get involved. So one is to be involved in resist and build. I will circle back to that. But another, right, is just to build that culture. And what does that look like? That's trying to be a little kinder, a little more caring, a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more patient. And everybody can do that, and can do that like starting now, right? So that's really important, that cultural piece. But so resist and build was about getting clarity about capitalism. What is capitalism? What is post-capitalism? Connecting up resist and build, finding out where the sweet spot, where we can, because we brought together a broad array of organizations working on system change, even some that, embrace reforms of capitalism, right? So where's the sweet spot that we can work together, and then learn how to work together just by working together. So we have working circles that actually do the day-to-day work. But we will be gathering in Atlanta, May 2nd through 5th. The public part is a big carnival beyond capitalism. And the other day will be more like workshops and that kind of stuff. It's bookended by sort of invite only strategy session. If that seems like you're really in that space, right? Familiar with solidarity economy, want to come and strategize, get in touch. But it's going to be an incredible gathering, 4-day gathering. There will be tours of Atlanta, performances, workshops. Yeah, it'll be great. So do come. Oh, yeah. And there's a link there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to be there, and I'm excited to be there and excited to see who else is going to join. And, I know Kali Akuno from Cooperation Jackson. I know David, y'all know each other too. I'm really excited. Having met most of these people since the pandemic through virtual interviews. I used to produce Professor Wolf's Economic Update for a number of years. So I got to meet a lot of people digitally that I'm now going to have the opportunity to spend some time with face to face and rock and roll about how we can get ourselves out of this.
And I also want to lift up and point out, Emily, your really poignant and powerful point about all of us can begin to shift our cultural assumptions and how we treat each other. Because the solidarity economy is a way to actually meet our needs. And for me, the part that is so very important is that I do not believe that human nature and humans are fundamentally angelic, but nor do I believe that humans are fundamentally demonic, right? I think that almost all of us basically do what we're incentivized to do, what we're taught to do. And I think back to my mama, my papa, who raised me, who taught me to be a loving, kind, like capitalism is actually at odds with that. Capitalism is fundamentally about extraction, exploitation, oppression, getting over on people. To me, the solidarity economy is just, oh, be a good person. Oh, and take care of everyone. Like, we can do this. This is not rocket science, actually. The problem is in the socio-political economic sphere, we've literally incentivized all of the worst aspects of of human nature, rather than encouraging the better angels of our nature.
Absolutely. Yeah, the system really does reinforce that competition, that self-interest. And as a matter of fact, the economic theory that underpins capitalism is built on the assumption of human nature. There is actually an actor named Homo economicus, literally economic man, that is assumed to be calculating, rational, self-interested, right? You're trying to get the biggest bang for your buck, right? So I would not deny.
And selfish.
And selfish, self-interested, absolutely, self-interested. And the whole theory of capitalism is built on that assumption about human nature, right? And it assumes that everybody's going to pursue their own selfish self-interest, and that through the invisible hand who will produce the optimal outcome for all of society. That is basically the capitalist theory, right? Starting way back with the invisible hand.
Can I just point out that the invisible hand, which of course Adam Smith made famous as a metaphor. So I'm going to pop quiz, y'all. So who said this? And this is a paraphrase. It's not a direct quote, but it's pretty darn close. Never does the merchant class gather, even for mirth and merriment, but the topic of conversation becomes a conspiracy against the working class. Sounds like Karl Marx, right? I bet you know who said it.
Well,
Adam Smith.
Yeah. Yes, it was more complicated. But what got distilled, right, in economic theory is that more, right? He was a moral philosopher as well. But we never hear about that. We never hear about that side, right? And his assumptions about capitalism is that there would still be this strong moral underpinning, but that got completely wiped out. It got, just taken out. And what's left is this dog eat dog world, survival of the fittest, social Darwinism of capitalism. And that is really what the system is built on. And you could imagine, right, that is very problematic. We're more complex than that, right? There is the better angels of our nature, as well as there are some not so pretty. There is Homo economicus in our nature as well. But to build a system like solidarity economy that is really trying to incentivize and encourage and lift up and support our better angels, right, seems like a much healthier system. And not only economy, but I'd like us to think broader than economy as it's normally narrowly defined, right? So if you go back to the root of the word economy, it means management of the household. So you could think about that as your family household or your regional or your state or national or international household. How do you manage that, right? So it goes way beyond just like the narrow confines of the economy as we normally understand it, and includes the political system, includes the social system, includes culture, right? The whole shebang, really. And that's what we're talking about transforming.
Well, Emily, as always, you break it down without dumbing it down. I find this conversation inspiring, and the time has really just flown by. So I want to thank Emily Kawano, co-coordinator of the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network and co-director of the Wellspring Cooperative, for joining us here on Redneck Gone Green. Thank you so much, Emily. Shane, as we conclude this, I am reminded, you and I often talk about how ain't nobody coming to save us. But what Emily did for me really was underscore, but that's all right, because we've got each other. Like, as rednecks, what we know is we know how to skin a buck. I know how to run a trot line. I know rednecks know how to do stuff, right? And when Emily lays this out, it really does underscore for me, like, we got this. We know how to do this.
Yeah, I think so. And it's comforting to me to see pockets of it popping up everywhere. People coming together in a variety of different ways to perform a variety of different tasks that are actually doing the work of saving each other from natural disasters, political ones. We just saw it this past weekend. I don't know if you saw the horrific natural disaster event that occurred down around by my home. There were 250 some odd tornadoes reported between Mississippi, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. And those people, I'm sitting there going, well, yeah, I know you're going to sit there and look at each other and cry and hug it out. And you're going to pick up the shovel the next day. You're going to go right to work, clean it up yourself, because we all know ain't nobody coming to save us. And I seen the thing in about the West Virginians that were still suffering from that flood. You know, they're not getting any help either. But it's good to know that people are willing to stand up for each other. So, yeah.
And country folk do that, right? And all of us can do that. Shane, I feel like we're like around the campfire, right? Rednecks all often have conversations like this, but like we're coming to the end of the program. So I'm going to take this opportunity to remind viewers and listeners that we are building not just an audience, but a community here at Redneck Gone Green. So I ask you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this with others. Help people to see that there is a place where ordinary folk are coming together and talk about this together, building the community, building the practice for peaceful revolution. We can do this together, Shane. I appreciate you, brother. I'll see you next Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Peace, y'all.
All right, brother. Talk to you later.